Hello! Welcome to Levels Plus Whenever episode 135. And in the wake of the Switch 2 Direct announcing GameCube games, I had some thoughts in mind. So I've got a two-part GameCube retrospective, some games I'd like to see come to NSO, as well as my top 25 GameCube games. I don't have any pickups this time, so let's just dive on in. And before we head out, I gotta at least pop the fact that I'm wearing my Sky shirt for this, because surprise, surprise, that's high on my list. Alright, let's dive into first part of this video, which is, we now know that the GameCube is coming to the Nintendo Switch, and we know what we are currently expecting. So we have these 3 launch games and then these 7 games that have been announced for the future. But there's quite a bit more to go off of. So I've grabbed a tier maker of every GameCube game that came out in North America. And this was done by Brandon Fraser fan. Thank you. And I've pulled together some ideas for what we might also see coming down the road. So, as we know, F-Zero GX, Zelda Wind Waker, Soul Calibur 2 are all coming to the Switch 2 at launch, with Chibi Robo, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, Luigi's Mansion, Pokemon Colosseum, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Strikers going to be following up. Probably monthly, I'm gonna guess. From there, we have these Nintendo games that don't involve a license or are working outside of a conventional situation. So when I say that, I'm talking about Metal Gear the Twin Snakes, which is down in the next section. Alright, so I've created a likely confirmed. So these are games that I think have a chance of also joining the GameCube library in the future. And we'll leave the ones that don't have that likelihood down here in the same row. 1080 Avalanche has licensed music. Will they actually go out of their way to relicense that music? Will they license new music? Will they just replace the soundtrack with the 1080 snowboarding soundtrack? We don't know. That is the only reason I think that it's not as likely as it would have been if they didn't go the licensed music route. So I'm going to leave it here for now. We'll see what happens. They re-licensed Kawasaki for Wave Race 64. Animal Crossing Original. I see this being a bit tricky. Mainly because A, it's going to double up on Nintendo emulation, because you'll have NES games in this. But I think that by including the original Animal Crossing in a lot of the stuff that it was doing might be technically difficult, because it did so much with memory cards and swapping and all that to actually fully engage with it. I don't know how that would work with the Switch 2. So I'm going to say that they'll probably just focus on a new Animal Crossing and leave the original one that we got in the past. Battalion Wars was not developed by Nintendo. It was developed by a third party, Kuju London to be specific, but it is a Wars game. So I think that there is at the very least some potential, because Nintendo owns it, for that to make its way over. Cubivore, I don't know if Nintendo would bother at this stage, beyond just neat novelty factor, but it is the kind of game that would just potentially work out, and they do own it. It is theirs. So we're going to go ahead and slide that up here, because that's just one of those weird choices that they would probably slide in with something else. A custom robo I can see coming. It's the only time it's been localized outside of maybe a DS or 3DS version. So I could see them doing it. DDR Mario Mix, I don't, because there is no dance pad for the Switch 2, and I don't foresee that happening. I also don't know about any of these Donkey Kong games. Jungle Beat maybe, but I don't know if it was playable on a controller, because it's compatible. Let me look. Alright, per Wikipedia, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat on the GameCube was only controlled with the bongos. They did release a Wii version that had Wii controls, so you use the nunchuck to move, but you use the Wii remote to do waggle stuff. So I'm going to leave these three here, unless they do some significant stuff to Jungle Beat. I don't foresee them porting any of those, or making new bongos. Eternal Darkness is one of the two M-rated GameCube games Nintendo published themselves. And I think it has a pretty good chance of showing up as a M app for the GameCube, because Nintendo owns it. Silicon Knights may have made it, but Nintendo owns everything about it, including the sanity effects. So there is really no reason to work with Silicon Knights to bring it back, especially since that developer is long dead. Geist was developed by InSpace, but for all intents and purposes, I believe Nintendo still owns it. So I think it is a high likelihood that they would re-release it on their M-rated GameCube app once they have it. Four Swords Adventures is a GBA connectivity game. I would love it if they could figure out a way to bring this back, because I think it's a great game. I don't know how they would do it. That's where I have a hard time. Because you could make Four Swords Adventures using the game chat that they just showed off, and it would work beautifully if we could figure out a way to make that work, that every player has their own screen. You don't need to go into GBA mode to play it with four people. But that would require more work than a Nintendo Switch app. So I don't think that that's going to be happening as much as I'd like it to. Again, this is here for Ocarina of Time Master Quest because it was a GameCube exclusive in North America. I suspect if they were to re-release it, that would be on the N64 app and not here. Twilight Princess is absolutely likely to be showing up because Wind Waker did. I just imagine that they thought it was simpler to just wait for the GameCube app and release those instead of trying to course correct on the bloom saturation on Wind Waker. I don't know why they would have held on to Twilight Princess HD till the Switch 2. I think they'll just re-release the GameCube original and just leave it at that. Pretty much everything Mario, I think, is a safe bet outside of DDR. So let's just throw Mario Golf and Double Dash. Will we get all of the Mario parties? Well, we got all of them for the N64. We will get Mario Tennis. We will get Mario Superstar Baseball. I think that all of those are pretty much destined to show up. I'd be surprised if none of them did. At this point, I don't see Metroid Prime 2 Echoes getting a remaster the same way that the original did, when we can just port it to the GameCube app and it'll look pretty nice through that, because these three games look pretty nice through it. I just think that's what they're going to do with Echoes. They'll probably time this release shortly around the release of Beyond, I'm going to guess, to get a little extra hype. So we'll just have to see how the release schedule for these 7 go, because I think this is also, it's almost good enough for me to throw it up there, to be honest. Odama was a collaboration with Ute Saito in his studio, Woot Studio, I can't quite remember. It required a microphone, which the Switch 2 has. It's also really bizarre, and one of the weirder games on the GameCube, released by Nintendo for sure. Does it have a chance of coming back? Probably. I don't know if it's high on the priority list, but it has what it needs to do what it needs. So I think it will work. A Pokemon box is absolutely not coming because they've evolved past this. Pokemon Channel, I don't know. This has anime stuff on it, and I just don't know if Nintendo wants to work out arrangements to get all that licensing with other parties back together to re-release a game that was really inconsequential in a lot of ways. So I don't foresee that happening. I see the two Star Fox games. Adventures was developed by Rare, but Nintendo and Microsoft are pretty chummy these days, and a lot of Rare's N64 output is currently on the Nintendo 64 app. So I don't see any reason why Adventures would not be in the near future. And Assault is a collaboration between Namco and Nintendo. They're really good friends at this point, really collaborative. I would be shocked if it didn't show up. I think it would even show up before Adventures, to be honest. We're getting near the end. Melee. Easily the one that you think I would just throw into likely confirmed and not even think twice about it. But we still haven't seen the N64 Smash Brothers, and we've got practically everything else that I think Nintendo still has the ability to publish on the N64. There's still a couple rare games like Diddy Kong Racing. I don't think Donkey Kong 64 has made it yet. I imagine those two will probably show up closer to when Bonanzas is going to show up. But with Melee, that one's tricky. The fact that the 25th anniversary of Smash rolled by and we didn't get the N64 game with it. We got a few extra spirits and Ultimate instead. Kind of surprising. So I'm leaving it here because until I have reason to believe, I don't know if Nintendo's going to really give the Smash community what they most want. They seem to have a little bit of a bone to pick with older games in that franchise. WarioWare Mega Party games, I think, is pretty likely. Wario World, I think, is pretty likely as well. Even though Treasure developed it, Nintendo owns it. Treasure still exists. There's still Treasure games being re-released these days. I don't think it's going to be a problem for them to re-release it. And then Wave Race, I don't think there's any issues preventing it from being re-released in comparison to 1080. So I think it's a pretty safe bet that we'll be seeing that show up on the service. And then we have a row here of games that we probably won't. I didn't include a couple games that had licensing, like Kobe Bryant in NBA Courtside. The last one was for the GameCube. I just didn't see that happening between Bryant's death and the NBA license. So I didn't include that. There's probably one or two others down there that I just didn't think needed to be up here. But let's move into some third-party thoughts. And we're going to just go ahead and throw all of this up at you. These are a bunch of games that I think could happen based on events, we'll just say. As well as a few licensed games that I think would be a big get for the system, but I don't necessarily expect any of them beyond the first two. And then 4 cult classic games that I think would be really great to see, but I don't expect it because of the licensing that's involved. So, probable third-party stuff. Capcom. Capcom did a lot of Resident Evil. So, we could get Classic RE2, Classic RE3, Classic RE Code Veronica X. Those are all possible, because they were all in the GameCube. But Resident Evil 1 Remake, Resident Evil 0, and Resident Evil 4 are already all remade with remasters. So they're not going to show up on here. That would be shocking if they did. So that's why there's no REs on this list, because I just felt I would focus on original titles instead of ports. So Gotcha Force is a pretty good cult classic from Capcom. These are the two Mega Man games that were basically Nintendo unique, at least Network Transmission was. And then Command Mission was on the PS2 as well. But those are the two that were unique to this generation anyway. And then Beautiful Joe. There was 3 Beautiful Joe games on Switch. I just put the first one here to kind of represent that franchise. It would be a little surprising, especially with Kamiya back with Capcom, that this didn't happen. A little bit of Konami and Hudson. I think Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes will be on the mature rated GameCube app pretty quickly. Collaboration between Nintendo, Silicon Knights, and Konami. It will be interesting how they handle that, given the Kojima-ness of it. He's quite prominently in there. But we'll see. I think it's pretty likely, but we'll see how much Konami's still got to hate on for Kojima. And then I grabbed 2 Hudson games, because Konami themselves didn't actually have much of a presence on the GameCube outside of a lot of licensed things in sports. So I grabbed Bloody Roar Primal Fury, which is probably one of the better fighting games on the system, and then Bomberman Generation to kind of represent Bomberman, although there's also Bomberman Jetters as well, but I think Generation is the one that's better liked. Sega did a lot. Sega supported this system pretty hard, and I could have probably thrown in another 3 to 5 games of theirs, but I was trying not to just flood this with Sega games. But I grabbed Beach Spikers and Virtua Striker 2002, because both of those are really fun arcadey games. Phantasy Star Online 1-2 Pro, mainly because it has a split screen option. It's right there on the cover. I think if we get Phantasy Star Online, it would probably be this one that at the very least you could do split screen on. Skies of Arcadia Legends, you heard me pop off about this if you watched me at the Direct. Because it's so likely now. It would be the easiest thing for Sega to do, to just hand this over to Nintendo instead of having to remaster or remake it themselves. It would be the easiest, simplest, cleanest, and it's the best version of a very iconic game. And then there's a bunch of Sonic stuff. I just threw Sonic Adventure 2 Battle because I think that's probably the most liked and well-known GameCube Sonic game. Because there's Sonic Adventure 1, but that one's a bit busted. It's Sonic Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog didn't quite resonate long-term the way the Sonic Adventure games did. For Namco and Bandai, Dead to Rights, I don't know how good that actually is, but it is another game that they could put on the mature rated app. Pac-Man World 2, there's also 3. Both of those could make good additions. We got an exclusive, quote-unquote, exclusive Ridge Racer for the GameCube, which would make sense. And then Ribbit King. This was probably Bandai's biggest success on the GameCube. That was not a license. And it's got a bit of a cult following. So it would be kind of neat to just see that come back. Because From Software is working with Nintendo now, I threw both the Lost Kingdom games on here because From did develop those. I don't know if Activision owns the IP or not, or if it's From's, but I think those would be great to add. RPGs, much like the N64, or a little few and far between, better on the GameCube for sure, but these were some of the better ones. And a lot of the others, outside of Skies, PSO, and I don't think there's anything else from Nintendo. Fire Emblem, which we are getting, and Tales of Symphonia. Like, the rest of them have been remade in some masters. So the Baiten Kaitos games are down here. Paper Mario, Thousand Year Door, Tales of Symphonia. So I feel like these two would make a nice little addition along with Skies and PSO, and arguably Command Mission, to just kind of round out a lot of the RPGs, like high points on the system. Since Throwback Entertainment seems to own Extreme G, and there was 2 Extreme G games on the GameCube, I threw one of them up here because it seems possible. Koei Tecmo didn't do a lot for the GameCube, but they did publish Mystic Heroes, so that is a possibility. EA has not done anything for the Nintendo Switch apps yet, but this could make sense, SSX on Tour, because they did work with Nintendo to put Mario, Luigi, and Peach in it. So maybe. It's probably something I should throw in the bit and licensed game category, because there's a bunch of licensed music, and I'm sure branding and stuff in there. But of all of those collaborations, this one seems the cleanest, because otherwise you're dealing with boxers for Fight Night, and you're dealing with NBA and players for NBA Street V3. And then, Harvest Moon. This would be Marvelous re-releasing this instead of Natsume, I'm sure. And since A Wonderful Life has already been remastered, I went with Magical Melody as something that has not seen a re-release. Some big licensed games that I think would make a lot of sense, but I kind of doubt we'll see, are, of course, Rogue Leader and Rebel Strike. Those are huge, some of the best Star Wars games that have ever been released. At least 2 is considered as such, especially since it includes all of Rogue Squadron 1. If I remember right, one of these do. Simpsons Hit and Run is a Crazy Taxi clone with the Simpsons license, but who really knows how that would be re-released, given the mess of licenses that is now kind of lying in. And kind of the same deal with Hulk Ultimate Destruction. Marvelous game. Really, really good. We'd have to get Marvel on board. We'd have to figure out how Radical Entertainment / Sierra / Vivendi / whoever owns them now. It would be a mess, but it would be great to see. And then ultimately we have these games here that I think would be really neat, but again, trying to figure that out would be a nightmare. Second Sight, I think, might be owned by Embracer since it's a Free Radical game. I don't know. Metal Arms, again, that's another Vivendi situation. Killer 7, Capcom does not own this anymore. Grasshopper does, and Grasshopper's not really done anything to push that off of PC. So as great as it would be to see it, we probably won't. And Burnout ultimately is an EA franchise now because they bought Criterion, but they originally released the first 2 on the GameCube under Acclaim. So I don't know if EA, again, because EA's not done anything, if they even own the rights to the original 2 games and would even be interested in re-releasing them. And then here's a bunch of stuff that I'm aware of that I saw on the list below that has been remastered or remade or ported or just somehow available on other systems. So you could buy most of these on Switch or on modern platforms in another format. Killer 7 honestly could be here too because it is on Steam. But this is all stuff you can get elsewhere. And Kirby Air Ride's here because of the sequel coming out. I don't foresee Air Ride being released unless they want to throw it out there around the same time as the new one. But I don't know. So that's basically what I think the future of the GameCube Switch app looks like. And not... I really want to put Smash up here, but I'm not sure. Like, just looking at it one last time. But we'll see what happens, and hopefully third-party support is a little bit stronger than it has been for, like, the Game Boy Advance, which still doesn't have any third-party games. And the N64 has been a little bit dry on that front as well, beyond, like, Throwback, Koei, Tecmo. We did get Harvest Moon 64, so Marvelous jumped on that. But there's still a whole bunch, and it's wild to think that of the entire GameCube life, this was the only Square game. And it's already been re-released, so I don't have to think about it. I have to think about Square Enix not being a part of things all the time with other apps, but it's not that hard for the GameCube. Alright, let's move into part 2 of this, which, guess what, is going to be GameCube focused. We're going to figure out the top 25 GameCube games. I suppose I should change the date, because I originally built this in February, but I did add a couple things that I remembered that I played. Once I saw that the Switch 2 was getting GameCube games. So we're going to figure out the greatest of the greats here. And really quick, just eliminate a whole bunch of stuff that's going to probably not make it into this top 25. So I have played 50 games on the GameCube. I don't want this list to be too drawn out, so I'm not going to probably discuss the games I'm cutting. I'm just going to cut them, and we're going to narrow things down a bit. So Mario Sunshine, easily. Custom Robo's fine, but not great. I didn't finish Beautiful Joe 2, certainly not Crystal Chronicles. Bloody Roar, this is the one I remember the least out of all of them, honestly. I liked it, but I didn't love it. Not the best Bomberman game. I really didn't like Monkey Ball. I really didn't like Bites and Kaitos. I hated Warrior Within. King Kong was mediocre. I didn't like Underground 2's story. Gun was pretty mid. I didn't care for Future Perfect. I got rid of this and this. I think 64 is better. Alright, a nice solid round 1. Let me get this all organized. Alright, we're down to 34. So let's cut out some more. Personally, I don't care for Metal Gear Solid as a whole. I did beat that one, though. I wouldn't put Wario World in the top. I wouldn't put Luigi's Mansion in the top. I would not put Double Dash. That one snuck in. Wave Race and 1080 I both think are disappointing, so I wouldn't consider either of them in a top 25. Alright, we are almost there. I just got to eliminate 3 more. Beautiful Joe would be out of consideration for this list. Probably original Animal Crossing, to be completely honest. And of these, Splinter Cell. So we have a 25. So now I get to sort them all. Alright. A little bit of reformatting, and hey, look, it's my top 110 list, conveniently on screen. So we can do a relatively easy sorting job. So Beyond Good and Evil is going to be number 1. I'm going to put RE4 as number 2, even though the original RE4 is no longer on this list. I think that it is perfectly valid for it to be up this high. And Skies would be 3rd. I'm just kind of skimming the list to see what's next. Capcom versus SNK 2EO. I'm probably one of the only people that will put it up this high. And then Metroid Prime. And then from there, be Resident Evil Remake. And I think I'm on my own for the rest. So from there, we've got a whole bunch of games that are really good. I'm going to put Twilight Princess here because it has been in my top 110 in the past. I will slide Paper Mario Thousand Year Door into 8th place because I think it deserves being there. Again, it's also been in my top 110 in the past. Tales of Symphonia, I would put at number 9. Same deal. And then last but not least, I'm going to put Soul Calibur 2. Because while I prefer Soul Calibur 1 on the Dreamcast, this is a very close second. And I think it deserves top 10 placement. From there, I think Melee. The reason Melee is not in the top 10 for me currently is I feel that the series has evolved a lot since the release of Melee, and I really love Ultimate. I'm going to put Hulk here. I really think Hulk Ultimate Destruction is a fantastic game for the most part. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and then I think Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, still the best one. I think that's a nice group there for that row. I'm going to actually put Four Swords Adventures above Wind Waker. I think those two are right where they need to be. Sands of Time, another really solid game. Pikmin 2, I think, should be here. And then I would probably leave Power Tennis there. I think that's right. Tony Hawk's Underground, Second Sight, F-Zero, and then I think we are officially done. I think this is my top 25 GameCube games. It's probably not too surprising, at least the top bit. But Beyond Good and Evil is still one of my favorite games of all time. I just get really grumpy sometimes when I think about Ubisoft being the stewards of that franchise. And that it really rises above that crappy publisher. Resident Evil 4, brilliant game. I think most people would put it at number 1. And it deserves to be there. I just like Beyond Good and Evil that much, and I think Jade is that good of a character. And RE4 has been remade, and I prefer the remake in just about every single area over the original. The original is still iconic, though, and I still love it, but it is not the game that I still hold in my heart when I think of Resident Evil 4. Skies of Arcadia, one of the greatest role-playing games of all time. Easily one of Sega's finest moments. And just a brilliant game with great characters, wonderful atmosphere, the sense of exploration's off the charts. Wonderful. Capcom vs. SNK 2 EO. Probably not the way you should play it. With Capcom Fighting Collection 2 around the corner at the time of this recording, it really is going to lose that status. And I think I'm even going to make an executive decision and put Metroid Prime ahead of it. But I still think, before we wrap that up, that it is Capcom's finest moment as a 2D sprite-based fighting game that they ever made. I love this game so much, but the GameCube version is probably not the best way to play it. But it was my way of playing it for a very long time. Alright, so Metroid Prime just snuck up a little bit higher, and I think it deserves to be a little bit higher. I replayed the remaster a year or two ago. Brilliant game still. I absolutely adore it. One of Samus's greatest adventures. It's right behind Super and Dread for me, so it's third on the list. I'm so excited about Beyond. Resident Evil Remake took a while to grow on me. When I bought it on the GameCube, I actually didn't care for it anymore. I was just tired of the tank control format, but when I returned to it on the Switch, I fell in love with it. I think it's a marvelous game that truly deserves to be considered as one of the GameCube's high points, even though at the time of the GameCube, I couldn't. Twilight Princess is my favorite Zelda of this era. I just really think that Midna's a great character, that the world is really interesting and fascinating. It's got some really good dungeons. It just doesn't have the appeal of Ocarina in terms of the characters that you interact with, and towns just kind of... I feel like the town structure being so much bigger should have done more to engage with the player, like as the plot evolved, and I really feel like it didn't. And the wolf stuff's a little rough, especially chasing down bugs, but I really like Twilight Princess a lot. It is probably a top 5 Zelda still for me. Maybe it's top 6. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door is still a fantastic game. The remake is probably the way to go, though, but the GameCube original is still pretty solid. Probably the best Paper Mario to this day. Tales Symphonia could potentially fall. This is one of those games I'm actually scared of replaying, and the re-releases have not been good because they keep taking the PS2 version and porting that one instead of the GameCube original. So that's just disappointing because neither of the remasters have done it well. But I still have a lot of fun nostalgia for Tales of Symphonia. I really liked the characters at the time. I like the world, I like the music, I like the story. But again, if I went back to it now, it would feel very cliched, and I'd probably have a lot of issues with how like Zelos was written, and all that. But I'll just memory hole it for now and just say I still like that game. And the Soul Calibur 2. This will be the last one I really talk about. Is a great sequel to the original Soul Calibur and added in Link, which was fun, and a few other brand new characters. The stages were great. The music was probably the best the series has ever had. Really solid character designs outside of a couple. Looking at you, Necrid. It's just a really good game, and I'm so glad that it's part of the initial GameCube Switch games because it deserved to be. Alright, well, that ends this GameCube-focused episode. I hope that you enjoyed looking into the future and into the past for the loyal purple cube. Well, you have a wonderful set of days until I see you next. Take care, friends.